uh, instead of the normal things that we do that aren't so meaningful. So welcome everyone to Buddhist Center. Today on Sunday, it's Sunday, so we're looking at Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment. Super fortunate that we're among very, very few human beings that have the opportunity to find out exactly why we suffer and find out exactly why we don't have bliss 24/7. So these things are results. Why haven't we created these results in our life? What is the problem? Why is it that I have to suffer? Why is it that I can't seem to hold on to happiness for any significant period of time? And luckily, we've come into contact with the tradition that Buddha Shakyamuni taught us 2,600 years ago that shows us the precise answer to the question, why do I suffer? And why do I seem to have happiness for a little bit, and then it slips out of my hands, and then I have happiness for a little bit, then it slips out of my hands. And Buddha was so clear to show us exactly why we suffer and exactly what we would have to do to stop that suffering and exactly what we would have to do to achieve a state of complete bliss. So today we're looking at the material that would show us exactly how to produce that result of complete freedom from suffering and a complete state of infinite happiness and bliss. So before we get started and go any further into the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, we're so fortunate actually that we're in the section that begins the Four Noble Truths in a true way in this section, because we're dealing with the teaching shared in common with beings of medium capacity. And we know this is where Lama Tsongkhapa really leans in hard into the Four Noble Truths. And the Four Noble Truths, of course, we find in many different teachings that the Buddha gave, but the specific one in Sarnath, Varanasi, where the Buddha taught the specific Four Noble Truths and taught them in 3 different ways, is where the section that Lama Tsongkhapa really focuses in on. And hopefully we can do the same today. So, but before we do that, let's get into a position, a physical posture that would be conducive to us being able to have a clear mind. Our physical posture, the great Indian masters and great Tibetan masters tell us has a lot to do with the clarity of our mind. So they've shown us through lots of practice, lots of work that they've done on themselves, exactly what they did in order to mature their minds from a state of mind like my mind right now to a state of mind that was like Khenser Geshe Wandak's mind. So clear, so compassionate, etc. So the physical posture that we're getting into is called the 7-point Vairocana posture that we get into every single time before we start the teaching. This is a posture that allows for all of our blood to flow in the best way, all of our winds and channels, everything to be aligned in the most suitable fashion for us to be able to have clarity of mind. So when we look at the 6 preparations practice, and we look at it in relation to that, before we start any kind of meditation, it's so wonderful that Lama Tsongkhapa and the great masters have given us kind of guidelines on what to do that will allow our meditations and allow our practice to be the most effective. So we do what's called the 6 preparations, where we clean the room first, where we're going to go do our practice in. And then we arrange images of enlightenment on an altar of in some way, or we imagine them if we don't have the material possessions. You know, this is all about working on our minds. We shouldn't get too caught up in what they say, spiritual materialism. We should really understand that we're trying to work on our minds, and external factors can add as a support for working on our minds, but really it's an internal job. So anything that we're doing is to try to make it so that we can mature our mind. We're getting into a posture so we can mature our mind. We're cleaning the room so that we recognize just how wonderful these deities are that we're inviting in when we summon the merit field, and we're making sure that it's a proper place for them. And then we arrange the images of enlightenment. And then the second step is that we put out offerings that we've obtained honestly in a good way and arrange them beautifully. So we arrange the offerings on an altar beautifully. So that's the second step. And then the third is that we sit down on a meditation cushion and we get into a posture like the 7-point Vairakana posture and clear our mind. We really get our mind to a state of clarity. And the 7-point Vairakana posture real quickly is putting our legs into the cross-legged fashion, putting our right hand on our left with our thumbs touching, making kind of a diamond posture position, if you will. In the legs, preferably in the lotus position, but do what you can. If you have any kind of physical limitations, just work within those limitations. If it's only if you can do full lotus, wonderful. If you can only do half lotus, wonderful, or just cross-legged, or even with your feet on the floor. It's just important that you work within the range of any limitations that you have, and know that we're working on our minds. We're trying to mature our minds, but our body can be a useful support, but isn't the end all be all, if you will. So we have our legs in whatever cross-legged fashion, preferably the Vajra posture we can get into. We have our right hand on our left with our thumbs touching. We have our vertebrae like a stack of coins, back very, very straight, shoulders in a comfortable position, not leaned forward, not leaned too back, because we don't want our back arched. We want to have our back in a very, very straight posture. So we have these four so far. We have our legs, our hand, our back, and our shoulders. And our shoulders should be sitting comfortably that allow for our arms to bow out. We see that incredible meditator, Lotsawa Marpa, and we see that meditation position that he has where his arms are very bowed out. And this allows for the proper alignment of our internal kind of being, if you will. So we have our shoulders in a comfortable position. Now we're going to tilt our head slightly forward, not forward like this, but not back. So we don't want it straight up. We want to have it just slightly forward. Okay. And then we're going to have our eyes just slightly open, pointed at the tip of our nose. And I say slightly open because if they're closed, we have a tendency to fall asleep. If they're open too much, our conceptuality can kind of get out of control. So we're trying to find a happy medium. And if we start with our eyes closed, it may seem like it's easier to meditate at first, but it actually will become a hindrance later on in your practice because there will have a tendency to have subtle dullness come in. Even when you've reached kind of more advanced levels of meditation, there'll be a ceiling on your ability to kind of get to the next level because there'll be a dullness there that you've habituated, that you've gotten used to because of not meditating in a proper way. So these are just suggestions that the great masters have given over the last 2,600 years. If you don't find them good suggestions for you, don't take them. But you will find these suggestions and all of these advices in the great texts. And we can name so many of them where we find this suggestion to keep your eyes slightly open, pointed kind of at the tip of your nose, because you already have your head in a kind of tilted forward position. So it's natural now that your eye is going to kind of, if it's only slightly open, be pointed down kind of at the tip of your nose. And hopefully where you're meditating, there's not a lot of busy kind of patterns and so forth. They say if you can make it so that where your eyes are gazing down is kind of a blank slate, that would be best, because then you don't have a tendency, even with your eyes slit, to look at different patterns and everything and so forth. So you could even put down some kind of blank colored cloth underneath where you're going to sit so that when you look down, you don't have any of the distractions that you would have if you were looking at a patterned rug or something like that. So you have your eyes slightly open, pointed at the tip of your nose. Now we focus on our mouth. We're going to have our mouth in a comfortable position with our tongue on the top, resting against the teeth. And this allows for the saliva to flow in a kind of natural way so that you won't, suddenly find your mouth filling up with water. And then we're going to add an 8th point because we've gotten through 7 now. It's called the 7-point Vairakana posture, but in Pabunka Rinpoche's Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, you also find sometimes we say 8 points, and that's adding the breathing. So now we're going to do a little bit of practicing what we would need to do and some exercises that we would use to try to work on fixed meditation, to try to eventually get to the point where we have shamatha. To go through those 9 stages of shamatha, we need to begin somewhere. And here are some exercises that you could do with objects or focal objects that you could use that would help you to get your mind fixed. And the reason that we're doing it is twofold. One, to give you some exercises that you can do to learn how to fix your mind. And two, so that we can get ourselves into a space for this teaching mentally that's more realistic, where we can calm our minds down enough that we can really, truly hear this in a clear way so that we can have the wisdom arisen from learning or hearing, so that then when we go to analyze this material, we've heard it properly. We're not missing any of the details. And then we can truly see whether or not what we've heard today tallies with final reality, tallies with something that means something to us. Does it somehow change my mind in some way from the state that it's in now to a little bit of a better state? So we have to be able to have information to check out. As the Buddha said, you have to cut and rub the teachings. And if you don't have teachings to cut and rub, how do you cut and rub them? And if the teachings you have are partial, or if you've only heard part of the truth, how, when you cut and rub it, can you decide whether or not it's accurate? The only way you can decide whether or not what you've heard is accurate is if you've heard it all in an accurate way, and then you make a decision based on all of those facts. So you have to make sure that the facts that you have are the actual facts. So if you come to the teaching and your mind is so busy and you're thinking about all the things that you're attached to and you're running after and you want, or you're thinking about the person that you think's a jerk and can't believe we did that to you, and after this teaching, you're going to really give them a piece of your mind, then those kind of thoughts are creating a mess in your mind. And that mess in your mind is blocking, is causing you not to be able to hear this teaching properly. So the reason for the exercise, the twofold reasons are: one, exercising, coming up with things that you can do on your own to try to establish shamatha, to try to fix your mind so that you can get your mind calmer and calmer and calmer, so that you can look at things more and more realistically. And so that you can eventually have such a calm mind that you can look at the nature of reality and eventually see it directly. And then two, so that this teaching goes well in your mind. So that this teaching is able to be heard well, so that when you have that wisdom, that it's actually wisdom that arises from hearing and learning, that you have to analyze. And once you have appropriate, true information to analyze, then you can make a decision on whether or not it's accurate. And once you make a decision that, yes, this is accurate, this is something that can transform my mind, then you know it so well and can make it become part of your mind. You can start to think like Lama Tsongkhapa. You will start to think just like Arya Nagarjuna. You will start to think just like Buddha Shakyamuni. It's not some wisdom that they hold a license on, or some something that they have to grant you. It's something that you grant yourself, and then your mind starts to work exactly like these incredible beings. So we're trying to get our minds more realistic so that we have the material to work with on our own after this teaching, to be able to transform our minds into minds like those of the holy beings that we revere. Because we will become holy beings that will be revered. And we should really rejoice in the fact that we're doing that. We should rejoice in the fact that we're working towards the goal of becoming holy. And so many people in the world would never even fathom that that would be a good thing to do. Everyone's chasing money. Everybody's chasing so many different things that aren't, very holy. And when we can take a moment out of our lives and work on our internal spiritual being to try to become a holy being, to become an object of refuge, to become the most reliable guide in the universe, that's something to really, really rejoice in. So we're going to get our minds into a calm state so that we get that kind of push attachment out and push hatred out and try to push as much ignorance out as possible. And so we can focus in on this teaching, so we don't have the fault of the upside down pot meaning we don't have a vessel that can hear anything. We aren't listening. If a pot's upside down, you can't put anything in it. We aren't wanting to be like that. And sometimes, you know, in a lot of Western traditions, we find that it's very common that people feel like going to church or going to their center is just like doing their spiritual time. I'm just doing my spiritual bid. I'm not really listening to the teaching. It's just kind of on in the background. I'm checking a box so that I can feel good in my heart, that I'm a Buddhist, I'm a practitioner, I'm a Christian, I'm a Muslim, I practice Judaism. And why do you say you do that? Well, because once a week I attend this thing, I sit in the back. I couldn't tell you 10 minutes later what the person said. It's not like I'm really applying this to my life. I'm just checking a box. So if people say, oh, what religion are you? I can say, well, I'm Buddhist because I go to this thing on Sundays and I listen to this stuff on Sundays. But the whole point of Buddhism is to wake up, is to change your mind from a mind that has these adventitious defilements to a mind of perfection. And this mind can be changed from the state where it has adventitious defilements because these defilements are not its nature. The mind is in the nature of clear light and unsullied. And it's the emptiness of our mind that is the same exact emptiness that the Buddha's mind has. So because our mind is empty, it can mature into whatever dependent origination turns it into, if you will, whatever we dependently originate our moments into. And the Buddha has dependently originate each and every one of his or her moments into bliss, into perfect love, perfect compassion, perfect skillful means, perfect power, perfect wisdom, and is the most reliable guide in the universe because dependent origination is working in a way that it is not working in our lives. Our dependent origination is creating our samsaras, creating our suffering. Our imprints are projecting a reality that is pure suffering because it's brought on by contaminated karmas, afflictions, and their seeds. But the Buddha's reality is only brought on by purity, and there is only good that creates more good, that creates more good, virtue to virtue to virtue, and virtue causes happiness. And the Buddha doesn't have any of the ingredients in his or her mind that will produce anything other than the spontaneity of bliss that's always occurring. So this is what we're working on, and this is who we will become once we've practiced enough, and once we have that actual wisdom that we're talking about today in our minds. Once Tsongkhapa's wisdom is our wisdom, Buddha's wisdom is our wisdom, then we'll become this holy being. But if we're not listening, then we don't even have anything to analyze. And if we're only kind of listening, that second fault of the pot, a pot with a hole in it that's leaky, if we're only kind of paying attention, then we're going to forget stuff. And if we're forgetting something, then we don't have a complete topic to analyze. And then the other fault of a pot, the third fault of the pot, is a contaminated pot. We're sitting here and we're not really having an open mind. We're not being objective. We're sitting here in our little subjective world and deciding what parts we want to listen to, what parts we don't want to listen to. Maybe we have a completely closed mind. We have some kind of preconceived notions about what things are. We think we have a bigger view of reality than we actually do. And that bigger view of reality, that ignorance about how things really, really are, is like a big barrier to us being able to hear these teachings properly, because we think we ultimately have a view that supersedes whatever I'm saying, that supersedes what Buddha's saying. But what Buddha's saying is nice, and what Buddha's saying can be helpful, but there's a view that's actually way above that. And I'm holding on to this idea the entire time I'm listening, so it's blocking me from actually hearing what can help in a true way. So when we look at these faults of the three pots, I know I keep bringing them up because Rinpoche brought them up over and over and over again. When we look at these three faults, we have to examine whether or not we're one of these three kinds of vessels. When we look at, when we're taking a Tara initiation, for instance, we're becoming suitable vessels to eventually be able to absorb Tara. Well, here we're trying to become suitable vessels to be able to listen to the Dharma, because that's where it starts. That that suitability starts at the moment the teaching is begun. Do I have any of those three faults? Am I truly zoned in on this teaching in such a way that when I leave, it's going to be something that really changes who I am? And that means forever. And that's the most beautiful thing in the world. As we start to work on our minds and we start to put all of these pure imprints of truth in our mind, the pure imprints of truth are so much more powerful than the BS that we normally put into our mind. It's like an atomic bomb against BS. And if that atomic bomb against BS goes off in our mind, that means our mind will now and potentially forever be seeing things in a proper way that isn't a, that seeing things in a proper way that don't appear so deceptively. And to us, everything is appearing in such a deceptive way at varying degrees, depending on our karma, depending on our imprints. Some of us like flowers, some of us like cars, some of us like guitars. We have our own special potpourri of things that we throw our subjectivity onto and make them bigger than they are. You can make your own list and decide which one of those things you find the most attachment to, and which one of those things you find the most disgust in. And then ask yourself, does everyone find those things to be as great as you do? And if the answer is no, then there's something going on there from your side that's creating a problem, that's creating a desire to run towards or run away from things and creating anxiety in your mind. Yes, Lorinda, I see you have your hand up.
I just want to tell you, your flowers look great.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we went and picked. I didn't really do much picking because my back right now is so out with herniated discs and wonderfulness of samsara, the suffering of aging and sickness together, pretty good. But I drove in a car and we went and got these beautiful flowers from Lori's parents' house. They weren't there, so they said, go pick them. They probably saw us on their cameras picking them, but we have all of these wonderful flowers. And then Lorinda was able to share them with the neighbors because she's so thoughtful. So thank you. I appreciate the compliment on the flowers that you set up. They do look good. They smell too. I won't say smell good because I have a little bit of a beef with the smell of flowers at times, but that's my karma. This flower does not objectively have a delicious smell to it. Why? Because as I smell it, it smells a little bit like, when you're in the bathroom and you use a smell to cover up things. So it just always smells like that to me. So I don't know. I'm just telling you subjectively what my olfactory is that nose, experiences in relation to flowers. And some people say flowers smell so beautiful. I say, oh, I don't really have that experience. If there was beautiful smell objectively from the side of the flower, then I would be smelling the sweet, fragrant aroma right now. It would be enhancing my mind, enhancing how I would be doing things. But, even it could be, if I start to really zone in on it, a little bit of a distraction, and I'll think, oh, maybe I think I have to sneeze or something. I can create so much namdo, so much conceptuality in my mind if I get enough inappropriate mental conduct around the smell of the flower. Oh, it's really a distraction. That flower is kind of tickling my nose. It's not doing any of that. It's just, we can take inappropriate attention and turn angels into devils, as they say, and vice versa. Devils into angels in our mind. And we all do it from our own side subjectively. And then we decide what an object is once we, have this collective engager that first takes it in for a moment, and then we eliminate it of engager based on our karma, eliminate all these other details around an object, and then see what we see. We name it what we name it, and decide what it is what we name it. So the only way we're going to stop doing that is to figure out what the actual nature of reality is. Does this smell delicious or doesn't it smell delicious? It subjectively smells delicious. You smell it, it smells delicious to you, but objectively it doesn't have any deliciousness from its own side. But there's an object over here, but it doesn't have all of the qualities. I don't know what Suma sees, my dog. What does Suma see? Do they see, oh, that's a beautiful flower, a neutral flower, an ugly flower? Very interesting when we start to look at subjectivity and we look at causes and conditions and collections of parts, and then the naming process that goes into our bringing them into existence. And that's the kind of stuff that we analyze. But where do we find this information from? We find this information from Buddha's teachings. And the only way that we know what to analyze, what any of the stuff I'm talking about means, is to study, is to listen to these teachings properly, have the wisdom arisen from hearing, then have something to analyze. Say, is this flower objectively existent? Is it subjectively existent? Is it non-existent? How is it abiding? Are there, directionally partless particles there somewhere that are just there, that are inherently existent, that are making it come into being? The answer is no, just as an aside. But are there any of these things that so many philosophical tenet systems posit as being there, as having some kind of final reality, having some kind of final creator other than dependent origination? Is there a creator other than dependent origination? And that dependent origination is subjectivity, is causes and conditions, collections and wholes. But you can have as many collections and wholes and causes and conditions as you want. But if that name, if that image, if that definition, if that conceptuality isn't occurring from my side, what do you have over there? You don't have any of the things that we're naming until that name happens. So we have to get to a realistic place from where we can listen to these things and from where we can, truly shape our minds. So 7-point Vairocana posture, back to that. So we went over that, right? Yeah. And we talked about the 8 points breathing. So we're going to begin by breathing in and out through our nose, bringing the breath all the way to the top, filling our lungs and our diaphragm, gently turning it around. We're not trying to now suddenly, okay, we're going into breathing and we're forcing it in some way. We're trying to, and it's very difficult because once we say focus on the breath, you start to try to manipulate it. And this is part of the exercise because you're not conceptually manipulating anything. You're just letting your mind focus on breathing in, breathing out, and then counting of the breath. So you're doing this in the most natural fashion as possible. Breathing in, filling the lungs and the diaphragm, gently turning it around, breathing out, and counting the breath. And you're doing this only through your nose, because remember the 7-point Vairocana posture, we had our mouth in a comfortable position with our tongue on the top. You can't really breathe with your tongue on the top of your mouth against your teeth. So we're really trying, unless you have a cold, of course, you're trying to breathe through your nose. So you're breathing in and out, filling your lungs and diaphragm and counting. We're going to add one more focal object, which is Buddhist Shakyamuni in the front generation, about an arm length away, about the size of your thumb, eye height, beautiful, radiant and glowing. You see Buddhist Shakyamuni right behind me? Beautiful, radiant and glowing, but you're not going to use your eyes to focus on Buddhist Shakyamuni. You're going to use your mind. You're doing all of this with your mental consciousness. You're focusing on the breathing in, breathing out, and the counting. And the whole time you're holding this image of Buddha Shakyamuni in the front generation in a static form. So let's do that for a moment or two. Just do that exercise. Try to get our minds calmed down a little bit. Remembering the focal object is breathing in and out and the counting in Buddha Shakyamuni. Our mindfulness is telling us that's what the focal object is. We're not forgetting our focal object, breathing in and out and the counting in Buddha Shakyamuni. And then we have some guards checking. We have, first of all, mindfulness is holding the object, and introspection, the spy in our mind, is making sure we are holding the object. If introspection, the spy in our mind, sees us getting sleepy and not having a very clear object, then mindfulness brings it back to that object of observation of breathing in and out and the counting in Buddha Shakyamuni in a very, very clear way. If the introspection, the spy in your mind, sees your mind wandering, getting scattered, thinking of things other than the breathing out, breathing in and out and the counting in Buddha Shakyamuni, then mindfulness will grab the focal object of breathing in and out and the counting in Buddha Shakyamuni back to the center of your mind. So this is a brief explanation of how we would work on shamatha meditation. how we would get to a place where we could fix an object and have our mind physically, our mind and body physically, and our mental and physical pliancy, the state of just incredible feeling in our mind and body, and be able to focus single pointedly on an object for 4 hours or something like that. The only way that we can get to that state is to start getting to that state. So this is just a little practice to see what it would be like to engage in something like this. We're so fortunate to have this human basis from which we can practice the Dharma. We've met with Buddha Shakyamuni's teachings. Enthused by great compassion, you taught the Immaculate Dharma to dispel all perverted views. To you, the Buddha Gautama, I pay homage. We have all the causes and conditions necessary for us to practice a pathway that will lead to complete fearlessness and bliss. We can remove the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience the same exact way that Buddha Shakyamuni did. Buddha Shakyamuni's mind is pure. Buddha Shakyamuni's mind is a mind that has perfect wisdom, perfect compassion, perfect love, perfect skillful means, perfect power. Our minds will have all of those exact qualities as soon as we remove the adventitious defilements. Buddha recognized that his mind was empty of inherent existence and could mature. Likewise, our mind is empty of inherent existence and can mature. As soon as we remove all of the adventitious defilements, all of those stains, all of those afflictions, the self-cherishing attitude at its gross level and its subtle level, removing the afflictive obstructions and obstructions to omniscience, we too will have that complete state of freedom and bliss. It's only a matter of time. It's only a matter of practice. We engage in those practices just like Buddha Shakyamuni did, just like Nagarjuna did, just like Khyentse Geshe Wandak did, just like His Holiness the Dalai Lama does. We will achieve those realizations. We will become a being that the world reveres. We will be a being that abides in the merit field. Buddha Shakyamuni was so kind to come and teach us these things, show us the exact pathway to freedom. And not only show the exact pathway to freedom, but show all the varying degrees of stages necessary to be able to teach each being to their individual scope. And that was the true kindness of Buddha Shakyamuni, knowing that each sentient being had their own varying degrees of adventitious defilements and habitual tendencies, some worse than others. So Buddha Shakyamuni gave us so many antidotes that all lead to one specific goal, and that's complete bliss. Now imagine that Buddha Shakyamuni becomes very animated in the space in front of you. Previously, Buddha Shakyamuni was in a static state because we were trying to do fixed meditation. Now we imagine Buddha Shakyamuni animated, so happy, smiling. Buddha Shakyamuni came into this world to try and show us a pathway to freedom. We're engaging in practices that will eventually lead to freedom. So Buddha Shakyamuni is so impressed with the fact that we're engaging in the practice of a Dharma that he knew is so difficult to fathom that he wasn't even sure how to express it in the world. And we're able to meet with these teachings and all of the teachings in a complete way and see them as a complete integrated path. And Buddha Shakyamuni is so impressed and so happy. Now imagine that Buddha Shakyamuni goes from one form into like a fireworks display of the entire merit field. So imagine that, come on, Kala, imagine that Buddha Shakyamuni now is still there in a very animated form, but all around him now, he had been containing the entire merit field. All the holy gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas were contained within Buddha Shakyamuni. So now we imagine that we have the entire merit field in the space in front of us, imagining that we see His Holiness the Dalai Lama smiling and radiant, such a kind being. We're so fortunate to have him in this world. Imagining Kensur Geshe Wandak, who we spent so many years with us, who elucidated the stages of the path to enlightenment so clearly without leaving out any details whatsoever. And imagine how happy he is that we're continuing these teachings in whatever form he's manifesting right now. He's so happy. But right now we're imagining him in the space in front of us in the merit field, and imagine that he's just so impressed with the fact that he passed on over a year ago. And we're still talking about exactly what he was talking about. Now imagine other holy beings like Geshe Lobsang Gompo and Gen Gyatso, and imagining Demolocho Rinpoche, and imagining Geshe Dorje Damdu, and Geshe Malatenzin Lajranla, and Umzala Geshe Aga, and imagining Lama Zopa Rinpoche and Gen Palden Drapa Rinpoche. Imagining Thupten Chodron and Jeffrey Hopkins and Lama Alan Lawless and Kondrola, all these incredible beings that we have in our world that so many sentient beings will never even have heard the names of, let alone meet with or be in the lineage of. Now imagine that the extensive deeds lineage is so radiant in the space in front of you, passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni and Maitreya and Asanga and Vasubandhu and Dharmakirti and Dignaga and Vimuktasena and Haryabhadra and Shakyaprabha and Gunaprabha, imagining Lama Surlimpa and Atisha, who's a holder of both of the lineages of the extensive deeds and the profound view lineage. Atisha in terms of view, Surlimpa in terms of the practice of bodhicitta. Imagining now all the beings of the profound view lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Manjushri and Nagarjuna and Buddha Palita and Aryadeva and Chandrakirti and Shantideva. All these incredible beings are right there. We would have no clue what the second turning of the wheel of Dharma means if it wasn't for the kindness of Arya Nagarjuna and Chandrakirti and all these incredible beings. We're so fortunate to have them in our life. Imagining Chandrashita and Bhava Vega and Kamala Shila, all these incredible beings right in the space in front of us. And again, Surlimpa and Lama Atisha. Lama Atisha was so kind to combine all of these paths, make one integrated path. Imagining the beings of the lineages of blessings that Lama Atisha was so kind to help us to understand as well, passed down Vajradhara and Saraha and Matripa and Tilopa and Naropa and Lotsawa Marpa and Milarepa and Gampopa, that incredible student of Milarepa. Imagining them all in the space in front of you. You've been so affected by these beings. You've heard so many teachings as a result of these beings' kindness. You understand the grounds and paths and logic and reasoning and Vinaya and the profound view of the Madhyamika Prasangika and the emptiness of the mind, the Mahamudra techniques because of all of these kind beings. We're so fortunate. Rejoice in the fact that we know who they are. We will know more about them as we study more. We will have to know all about them in order to achieve complete Buddhahood, because we will have to know what they know and they knew in order to achieve the goal of Buddhahood, because there's no special information out there. There's not a secret teaching that no one's ever heard. We all have to progress through the stages of the path and remove the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience through the 5 paths and 10 grounds and so forth in the same way. So now imagine all of those holy beings that then come after Lord Atisha. Drone Tompa, that incredible lay lama that Atisha passed the entire Lamrim lineage to, imagining the 3 Kadampa lineages, all those old Kadampas, those 3 lineages, imagining the beings of the different lineages of Tibetan Buddhism, the Nyingma, Kaju, Sakya, and Galupa order, imagining Padmasambhava and Sakya Pandita and the Karmapas, imagining Lama Tsongkhapa's chief disciples, Kirtap J and Joseph J, imagining Panchen Sonandrapa and Basuchuji Jetson and Jayan Sheba and Janjai Rupi Dorje and Gonju Jimmy Wampo. So fortunate. Jayan Gabi Lodru, the 7th Dalai Lama, all these beings that we're so connected to. We've heard so many teachings from in terms of their literature or in person, and just rejoice in the fact that we can change our minds because these beings are part of our family, part of our spiritual family, part of our spiritual lineage that passes all the way back to Buddha Shakyamuni. Now imagine all of the deities of the Tantras. It's so rare that we have Tantrayana in the world. Tantrayana will not be taught by all of the 1,000 Buddhas that will come during this time. Only a few of them will teach it, but Buddha Shakyamuni is one of those teachers who teaches the Vajrayana path, and we've met with the Vajrayana path. So feel so delighted in the fact that we know a pathway that's so swift that we could become Buddhas in this very lifetime if we practice very, very, very well and joyously. Imagine the beings of the highest Yoga Tantra, like Kala Chakra and Guhya Samaja and Chakra Sambhava and Hevajra, imagining them all in the space in front of you, Yamantaka, all these beings, the wrathful protectors and so forth, imagining the yogic Tantra deities, performance Tantra deities, action Tantra deities, 35 Buddhas, all those incredible Buddhas in the space in front of you. Just by reciting one of the names of the 35 Buddhas and saying, I pay homage to you, we're able to get rid of eons of non-virtue. We see this as an antidote to our non-virtues that we can apply. The 35 Buddhas have so much power of basis. It's like a hookup in a way, you know, we say that we can get hooked up with a massive amount of karma if we rely on powerful bases to do our virtue in relation to. And the 35 Buddhas are such powerful bases of karma that just again, by making a prostration to Buddha Shakyamuni in that 35 Buddhas of confession sutra, the sutra of the three heaps, we can get rid of eons of non-virtue. So we're so fortunate we have those beings in the space in front of us. Khyentse Geshe Wandak gave us multiple teachings on the 35 Buddhas of confession. So we're connected again to these beings. So fortunate. Imagine all of the protector deities of the small scope, medium scope, great scope, imagining Vaishravana and Kalaputra, Dharma Raja, imagining Mahakala and Dharma, all the Dharmapalas, imagining Palden Lama, who's the wrathful emanation of Tara, all in the space in front of us. Very, very important when we do our practices to imagine the merit field. So we know, going back to the 6 preparations, we had the setting up the altar and cleaning the room. We had the making the offerings. We had the sitting down and setting our motivation, getting a clear mind. And now we're imagining the merit field. So this is all part of it. And refuge and bodhicitta is in there, and we'll include that when we bring all sentient beings. So now we imagine that the entire merit field in the space in front of us. We recognize that we want to be free from suffering and we want happiness. Likewise, all sentient beings want to be free from suffering and want happiness. Our pain hurts, their pain hurts. We aren't any more important than all sentient beings, and the greatest beings in the universe cherish others more than themselves. And the Buddha said that the secret recipe to not only achieving fearlessness, but bliss also, is to put others' needs before your own, is to develop this extraordinary attitude that says, I will take upon myself the task of freeing each and every sentient being from suffering and the causes of suffering and bringing them to a state of bliss. All the great Buddhas of the past, present, and future will all realize complete bliss and dependence upon a mind that cherishes others more than themselves, that then is coupled with the wisdom realizing emptiness. So we recognize that if we want to have fearlessness and bliss, we have to do exactly what the Buddhas have done to achieve their goals. And they've achieved those goals by combining wisdom with bodhicitta. So we know that we definitely want to emerge from cyclic existence. We know that because we've meditated upon the 8 sufferings, the 6 sufferings, and the 3 sufferings, we have a disgust for cyclic existence. Cyclic existence, we have repulsed by it once we achieve the place we're about to get bodhicitta, where we're about to achieve the kind of mind that is required and was required by all of the Buddhas to achieve their complete goals. So not only being repulsed by cyclic existence and having renunciation and wanting to definitely emerge will be enough. We also have to want all sentient beings to be free from their 8 sufferings, 6 sufferings, and 3 types of suffering, and be able to achieve bliss. So by recognizing that we can achieve all of our own aims by wanting to work for the sake of all sentient beings, we can come to the conclusion that we can achieve all of our aims and all sentient beings' aims by engaging in the Bodhisattva path. And the Bodhisattva path is the only path that leads to a complete abandonment of not only the afflictive obstructions, but the obstructions to omniscience. So if we want to have complete spiritual finality, if we want to achieve the complete highest level of spiritual development that we can achieve for ourselves, we have to rely upon helping others in order to do that. We have to make our minds so big that it can touch every single being in the universe in a really meaningful way and actually do something for them to help them. So we must become a completely reliable guide if this is what we want to do. We must become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings if this is what we want to do. If we want to really try to connect with and help all sentient beings, we are going to need to become Buddhas, and there's no other way around it. So right now we aren't Buddhas, unfortunately, but we only are not Buddhas because we haven't removed the negativities that keep us from being Buddhas. So now we start to think about, well, what could we do in the meantime? What if we aren't bodhisattvas yet, if we don't have the mind that wants to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings day and night, that makes us practice and do spiritual activities day and night, if we don't have that yet, how could we make that happen? The way that we would make that happen is by planting the seeds in our mind that would grow into a mind like that. If we start to, in a contrived way, act like we're bodhisattvas and that we really want what's best for everyone, even if it's not in a full way, even if we don't completely feel it, even if it's just imagination, we're planting seeds in our mind for it to actually happen. So bodhisattvas connect with all sentient beings that they possibly can. Buddhas connect with every single sentient being. So now let's imagine that just for a moment, we have the ability to do that. What do all sentient beings need? They need the same thing that we need. They need to hear the teachings. They need to engage in all of the practices that we need to engage in order to become fully enlightened, in order to have complete freedom from suffering and complete bliss. So imagine that we bring all of them here. Imagine we bring all the hell beings here, the hungry ghost beings, the animal beings, the humans, demigods, and gods. Imagine that we bring every single sentient being without exception here to be able to engage in these practices with us, because it's about connecting more and more to sentient beings. When we're doing our meditation upon emptiness, and we're imagining what that state of emptiness would be like, we're also bringing that into our bodhicitta meditation. We're recognizing that we ourselves are empty of inherent existence. The practice of calling all sentient beings here is empty of inherent existence, and the sentient beings are empty of inherent existence, the emptiness of action, agent, and object. But illusion-like sentient beings suffer, just like the illusion-like Jeff suffers. An illusion-like sentient beings want happiness, just like an illusion-like Jeff wants happiness. So all of these things work and exist from a subjective, conventional standpoint. So we have to be able to assert emptiness and dependent origination. We have to see that all of reality sits in the lap of emptiness. And because it sits in the lap of emptiness, then therefore, since our mind sits in the lap of emptiness, our mind can be transformed into a complete Buddha's mind, because it isn't fixed as something that is this or is that. It merely is what it is collected into and nominally designated as, that it comes into being as. We need to recognize this while we're doing any of our meditations, where we're bringing all sentient beings in, or imagine we're giving them happiness, imagine we're taking on their suffering, imagining we're cherishing them more than ourselves, and so forth. We have to imagine also and understand also that ourselves are also our suffering beings, our impermanent beings, our empty beings. Our practice is impermanent and empty, and that those beings are impermanent and empty. But the object of observation is the actual sentient being that is those things. Okay, so we have all sentient beings here. So every being in the universe is here. Imagine now that the entire mirror field just explodes with bliss, knowing that all sentient beings are here and unbiased. There's no quarreling or squabbling. There's no negativity going on. All the problems of the world have stopped for a moment. All the problems in the animal realm have stopped for a moment. All the torment and sufferings going on in the lowest realms of hell and hungry ghosts have stopped for a moment. And all the immense happinesses that seem too happy to practice Dharma have stopped for a moment in the higher realms, and everybody's listening very, very clearly. Now imagine that you're leading them in this prayer. So we're going to do the prayer of noble conduct, the 7-limb prayer. should be coming up on the screen. Will it go in the order, or is it going to go left and right side? Oh, I have it right here. We're good. Okay, so this is the king of aspiration prayers, Samantabhadra's aspiration to good actions, the Sanchimulam. In the language of India, Arya Bhadracharya Pranadana Raja. In the language of Tibet, Papa Zampo Chupi Molandi Jelpo. And we have a translator's homage. Homage to Manjushri, the youthful. Okay, prostrations. To all the Buddhas, the lions of the human race, in all directions of the universe, through past and present and future. To every single one of you, I bow in homage. Devotion fills my body, speech, and mind. Through the power of this prayer, aspiring to good action, all the victorious ones appear vivid here before my mind, and I multiply my body as many times as atoms in the universe, each one bowing in prostration to all the Buddhas. In every atom preside as many Buddhas as there are atoms, and around them all their bodhisattva heirs, and so I imagine them filling completely the entire space of reality, saluting them with an endless ocean of praise, with the sounds of an ocean of different melodies. I sing the Buddha's noble qualities and praise all of those who have gone to perfect bliss. Offering. To every Buddha, I make offerings of the loveliest flowers, of beautiful garlands, of music and perfumed ointments, the best of parasols, the brightest lamps and finest incense. To every Buddha, I make offerings, exquisite garments in the most fragrant scents, powdered incense heaped as high as Mount Meru, arranged in perfect symmetry. Then the vast and unsurpassable offerings, inspired by my devotion to all the Buddhas and moved by the power of my faith and good actions, I prostrate and offer to all you victorious ones confession, whatever negative acts I have committed while driven by desire, hatred, and ignorance. With my body, my speech, and also my mind before you, I confess and purify each and every one. Rejoicing with a heart full of delight, I rejoice in all the merits of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, Prachika Buddhas, those in trainings and the Arhats beyond training, and every living being throughout the entire universe, imploring the Buddhas to turn the wheel of Dharma. You who are like beacons of light shining through the worlds, who pass through the stages of enlightenment to attain Buddhahood, freedom from all attachment, I exhort you, all you protectors, turn the unsurpassable wheel of Dharma, requesting the Buddhas not to enter nirvana. Joining my palms together, I pray, to you who intend to pass into nirvana, remain for eons as many as atoms in this world, and bring well-being and happiness to all living beings. Dedication. What little virtue I have collected through my homage, through offering, confession, and rejoicing, through exhortation and prayer, all of it, I dedicate to the enlightenment of all beings. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Oh. Okay. Now we'll read the Heart Sutra. Yeah, we'll read the Heart Sutra. I was going to get fancy on you all, but we'll read the Heart Sutra first. The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the Samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajnaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita should see in this way. Seeing the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form. Emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics. There is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no I dhatu up to no mind dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind consciousness dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of prajnaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the three times by means of prajnaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajnaparamita, mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequal mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering should be known as truth, since there is no deception. The Prajnaparamita mantra is said in this way. Teata om gate gate paragate parasangate bodhi soha. Thus, Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajnaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son and noble family. Thus it is, O son and noble family. Thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajnaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. I prostrate to the gatherings of dakinis in the three chakras, who abide in the holy yoga of using space. By your powers of clairvoyance and magical emanation, look after practitioners like a mother looks after her child. Kala jube nejo damba ne ngushe duchu ngai dudo chen drubo lamo drubabo lamo yibu jinzi nezongandro zola shatselo aga samara tashandara samara. Aga zamara dajandara zamaraya be de ato on gate gate paragate parasangate bodhisoha. By the truth of the existence of the three jewels, may all inner and outer hindrances and adversities be overcome. May they become non-existent. May they be pacified. May they be completely pacified. May all negative forces opposed to the Dharma be completely pacified. May the host of 80,000 obstacles be pacified. May we be separated from all adverse conditions to the Dharma, and may we obtain all circumstances conducive to the Dharma. May there be auspiciousness, happiness, and well-being here, right now. Papa gonjo zonji gae dembe doji she lobo doji mebo doji shewa doji jagi baji medu bishe danji she dengori zo get into jaji ju she wadan medun ne be jandandra wadan dumba doji bondon donjoji daji de jandan da de lejo. Make a mandala offering as a request for teaching. We actually have time for teaching. Last teaching I gave was 10 minutes before the teaching's end by the time we got to the mandala offering. So here we go, making a request for the teaching. And remember, we're requesting the teacher, but this teacher is only giving a teaching through dependent origination. And think about the entire merit field. Think about all of our teachers, Kensur Geshe Wandak, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Geshe Dorje Damdu, and all of their teachers, and all of their teachers' teachers, and their teachers' teachers. And we end up going through all of those names that I talk about at the beginning of this teaching. These are our spiritual family. This is who allows this. These are the beings that allow this teaching to go on. So when we make the request for teaching, remember all of these holy beings as well that go all the way back to Buddha Shakyamuni. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jewel mandala to you, precious Guru. Idam Guru Radha Mandala Gamya Radayami. Sanye Jadan Zadi Janan La Janju Badu Dani Jazuji Dagi Juji Jibe Zonanji Jala Benje Sanje Jubasho Sanje Jadan Zadi Janan La Janju Badu Dani Jazuji Dagi Juji Jibe Zonanji Jala Benje Sanje Jubasho Sanje Jadan Zadi Janan La Janju Badu Dani Jazuji Dagi Juji Jibe Zonanji Jala Benje Sanje Jubasho. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. May this teaching be heard and understood in the language of all sentient beings. If you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. If you're attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you're attached to your own self-interest, there's no bodhicitta. If there is grasping, you do not have the view. All right. Thank you, everyone, again for spending this Sunday, Easter Sunday, right, and this incredible task. I heard Robert Thurman the other day giving a really beautiful kind of talk about how, love is really the basis of all religions. And we see how in the story of Christ's rising, how love even conquers death, how love, the love of humanity, the love of all beings in that beautiful story allows that particular being to even conquer death. And we know that all religious traditions, as His Holiness the Dalai Lama, are really founded in compassion. And Chandrakirti at the beginning of the Madhyamika Avatara pays homage to compassion because it's from compassion that the Buddhas were born, and compassion is important at the beginning, the middle, and the end. So happy Easter, or whatever other holidays are going on right now. Just a happy Sunday to all of you. So now we've been looking at Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment for half my life, but here we are again. So we're in some part of it somewhere. No, I know exactly where we are. We're in the medium scope section, and it's awesome that we're able to, if we've been paying attention, and I've been trying to pay as much attention as possible over the years to Kensei Geshe Wandak and Geshe Lobsang Gompo and His Holiness when he would give teachings, and Genjatso, and just really trying to pay attention, and then now, studying with more teachers and trying to pay attention to what these stages actually entail, and what this great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment is really presenting us with. And it's really presenting us with an owner's manual for ourselves in a lot of ways, a mirror for us to look deeply, deeply into ourselves to really know how we tick. How does this thing called a being imputed on among the five aggregates tick, and could he or she tick in a different way? And we're fortunate that the Buddha came and said we can tick in a different way, other than the suffering of change, and pervasive compounded suffering ticking that we're all so used to. And we're entering into the medium scope section, where we start to look at not only the gross types of suffering that are found in the small scope section, where we really, want to abandon attachment for this life. And we really want to make sure that we have high status. We want to make sure that we have a good future life. And we, are aiming in the small scope at much grosser goals than now we're going to start discussing. Now we're going to start discussing that those grosser goals that you have, where you're just trying to get rid of the hell, hungry, ghost, and animal existences, and you're just trying to get a pretty sweet position in the higher realms of cyclic existence, are actually a problem as well. So the problem isn't only in the lower realms of cyclic existence, the Buddha tells us. The problem is with all of cyclic existence. Any kind of contaminated existence that you are in will be a state of suffering. And no matter how high up you get into those types of existence, if they are contaminated, they will necessarily be plagued with among the three types of suffering, minimally the pervasive compounded suffering that even the beings in the peak of existence, or the vacuity, or these, funny names that we have for beings in formless states of meditative samadhi, even them who seem to have suppressed everything to the point where they believe they're in nirvana, are plagued with the pervasive compounded suffering and will have to be reborn again into other aggregates, other parts. They'll get a new part. If they only had 4, if they were in the formless realm, they'll probably get a fifth, a part of form. Because when we know the aggregates, we say among the 5 aggregates, because formless realm beings don't necessarily have the aggregate of form, but they have the other aggregates in some way, and they have the subtle form aggregate that allows them to, or the potential for a form aggregate that allows them to in the future take on another form within existence. Those dogs just really hate those form aggregates. So anyway, so anywhere in cyclic existence, the Buddha said, is a problem. No matter how high up you can get, no matter how much money you can get, no matter how good you get at meditation, if that meditation isn't coupled with wisdom, and it's not a liberating path, it will just cause more samsara. It will cause this cycle of rebirth to occur again and again and again. And it's about getting rid of the root of cyclic existence that allows us to actually achieve a complete freedom, a complete happiness, where all of the afflictive obstructions are extinguished, and the afflictive obstructions are what give rise to our suffering within cyclic existence. And those afflictive obstructions are caused by the self-grasping ignorance. So in the small scope, we looked at all of the varying topics which serve as the critical foundation for the realizations of the medium scope. So we look at, the foundation of all of our good qualities, or the teacher relating to a spiritual guide, and then recognizing this life of leisure and opportunity that's so incredible that we have, but then recognizing that we will die because of death and impermanence. And when we die, we can, we will be reborn. And the small scope looks at, we could be reborn in the lower realms of cyclic existence. And the only reliable guide that can show us how to be free from the lower realms of cyclic existence, how to achieve happiness, and so forth, is the Buddha. So we learn about going for refuge to the Buddha, and we learn about what exactly kinds of behaviors we should engage in, and what exactly kind of behaviors we shouldn't engage in terms of our goals. If we want to have happiness, the Buddha said, this is what you should do: engage in virtue. If you don't want to have suffering, if you want suffering, engage in non-virtue. But if you don't want to have suffering, abandon non-virtue. The very simple teaching of the Buddha: abandon evil, engage in perfect virtues, subdue your mind. This is the teaching of the Buddha. So the Buddha was so clear about, creating our reality and creating exactly the experiences that we would want to create, being a little bit smarter about our future, So the Buddha taught us all about what to engage in, what to abandon. And then if we don't abandon what we should have abandoned, and we don't engage in what we should have engaged in, how we purify that. And that's really where we leave off in the small scope. It's, those aren't those, just a general idea of the topics that we find in the small scope. And then right when we get into the teachings for beings of medium capacity, and we call them shared in common with beings of medium capacity, because we're always aimed at the great scope, as if we're all great scope practitioners. It's kind of funny. We call them in common with, as if we've realized them or something. The teaching shared in common with beings of small capacity, as if we're great practitioners that, have these teachings in common. When if you're anything like me, I haven't realized all of the teachings that are for beings of small capacity. So I needn't, really be so invested in this word in common with, because it almost produces an ego in my mind. But we use this word in common, so we know that we're setting groundwork, and we know that we're realizing from a realization perspective, realizing the things that we are going to need to have as realizations to realize the next things. And these realizations are things that we will apply in our lives, and we'll know if we have them based on how our mind operates, based on how we think as we're walking through the supermarket and as we're going about our day at our jobs, or we're, have our, see our neighbors next door. However, whatever's going on in our lives, whatever's going on in our mind at that time, we'll know if the Dharma is affecting it, if mindfulness is not forgetting the Dharma, and that spy of introspection is seeing if we have or haven't forgotten our Dharma, our practice, that the source of all of our goodness is the teacher. What did the teacher teach me? The teacher is the source of all goodness because the teacher can teach me something. Not because the teacher is handsome or because the teacher has really good duds, really nice clothes or something, or because the teacher's got a great haircut. No, it's because the teacher can teach the truth of suchness. It's through by learning suchness, the nature of reality, that we can become liberated. So what did the teacher teach me? Is that how my mind's working? Is my mind working in a way that kind of tallies with or is in accord with what my teacher taught me, what Khenser Geshe Wandak taught me, what he taught me in terms of this life of leisure and opportunity? Am I taking its essence? Am I really trying to make use of this human basis? Or am I wasting it? Am I throwing it out? Am I focusing on things that don't really matter at all? Or am I focusing on spiritual things? Am I focusing on the things that Lama Tsongkhapa says we can do with this human basis, like practice the teachings for beings of small, medium, and great capacity? Am I doing that? Is my mind reacting with the rest of the world like someone whose mind has been affected by these teachings, like someone who sees that I have to take the essence of this life? Is taking the essence of this life lashing out? Is taking the essence of this life gossiping? Is taking the essence of this life wasting my time on frivolous activities because I haven't realized death and impermanence? So we can see how, if we want to take the essence of this life, we have to know what taking its essence would mean. We'd have to know what doing something good with it would look like. And then we can see if we're doing it or not. It's not rocket science. We take these topics, we see that this topic is what a being of small capacity would have their mind saturated with. And we see if our mind's like that or not. And if our mind's not like that, then we work on our minds more and try to make our minds more like that by using reasoning, by applying analysis and giving a lot of reasons why we have leisure and opportunity, and looking at it from every angle, and looking at every angle of why we would want to take the essence of this life and why time is ticking, looking at every angle. Is there a way out? Does somebody get out of here alive? Analyzing that to the point where we are rock solid sure that no, we are not going to be the exception. We will not get out of here alive, but we have this thing right now. And we can take its essence right now. It doesn't matter. We're not dead right this second, but we might be in the next moment. So what am I doing this second with this leisure that I have, these 8 leisures that I have, these causes and conditions to meet with the Dharma, the causes and conditions that I have right now that can make me a Buddha in this lifetime, what am I doing right now about that? How is my mind behaving in relation to these teachings for beings of small, medium, and great capacity? Am I engaging in things that are going to create hell, hungry ghosts, and animal rebirths? Am I engaging in things that will make me into a slug? Forget hell and hungry ghosts if you don't want to believe in these things quite yet. Look at the animal realm. Am I making myself into a lobster who's going to live in darkness for all that period of time? And unless I stumble into this box and then I get boiled alive, is that my future? Am I creating that kind of future? Am I boiling lobsters alive so I can create that kind of future? And a future 10 times worse. What am I doing in this moment in relation to the small scope? Am I killing? Am I stealing? Am I engaging in adultery or sexual misconduct? Am I lying? Am I engaging in divisive speech, harsh words, or gossip? Is my mind coveting things? Do I want others to be harmed? Am I wishing harm? Am I just wishing that someday you're going to get yours? That's harmful intent. Am I thinking like that? Man, they shouldn't really be as rich as they are based on all the dirt they do. Why do they get to have their spotlight? In there's harmful intent where you're coveting, and B, you wish them to not have the things they have. Is my mind working like that? Do I have wrong views that are just penetrating my mind all the time? Am I thinking that things that are true aren't true? Do I think Buddha nature is a lie? Do I think karma and its results are a lie? If I don't think karma and its results are a lie, then why am I behaving in a way that's negative? If karma and results are true, I know that if I go and get a specific kind of education, I can get a specific kind of job. So I go do that in life. You all went and did that. You went and did something to try to have happiness and be free from suffering in the future because you had some sort of thing that you believed would produce this kind of result. You went and did that. So why then, if you were convinced with the fact that there is karma and its results, small scope realizations, and that you have this human life that you could take an essence of that's going to end, why would you engage in non-virtue? Why would you not practice night and day? This is how your mind gets affected. It's by going over this again and again and again, like I said last class, almost to the point of ad nauseum. I even get tired of hearing myself say the same things on Sundays and Thursdays sometimes. I almost like, oh, is this, another, I'm going to say this again. But no, we need to keep saying this. We need to keep connecting with the Nalanda Padans and Buddha Shakyamuni and all these incredible Tibetan masters. We need intervening factors in our life to help us to mature. We need teachers. We need teachers to teach us the truth of suchness. There's no external factor that's going to act as kind of a magic wand that's going to be able to take our suffering away. The Buddha doesn't wash away our negativities with water. Some kind of blessing the Buddha can give us, or remove suffering with his or her hands, or give us his or her realizations. It's by teaching us. And we have to keep connecting to the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas so that we're like that reflecting pool that can reflect the moon. We're like that condition that can then be connected to those holy beings. So we keep making supplications, we keep making requests, we keep entreating them, we keep thinking about them, we keep confessing to them so they know exactly what we're working on. We keep telling our minds what we want to do. We keep rejoicing so we know exactly what goodness we want to perpetuate. We rejoice in their goodness so that we know that that's the goodness we want to achieve. All of these practices that we go over week after week and that we find in the King of Aspiration prayers, the 7-limb prayer, and so forth, become the roadmaps to our spiritual success. I would say that the main practice in my life is the 7-limb prayer these days. I would say that 75% of my practice entails, spending maybe an hour or 45 minutes on just this 7-limb prayer, with a lot of details in it. But just on this 7-limb prayer, I'd like to say my practice is really going through all of the different mandalas and, meditating on all of these deities around me and the levels of the outer and the inner mandala and so forth. I'd love to tell you that that's what my main practice was, but my main practice really is, okay, we have images of enlightenment out with offerings. Let's sit down. Let's get into a posture. Let's try and get my mind clear. Let's generate, bodhicitta and think about refuge. Let's have the merit field, bring all sentient beings here and make a 7-limb prayer and make further supplications. I mean, really, that is such a holy practice. And when Manjushri met with Lama Tsongkhapa and Tsongkhapa said, do I have the view of emptiness or not? Lama Tsongkhapa said, no, but you will soon. But you need to rely upon 3 things. 1, making supplications to the Guru who's inseparable from the Yidam. So we're making supplications to the Guru who's inseparable from the Yidam. Seeing our teacher is inseparable from our root deity. Making supplications. Number 2, accumulating merit and purifying negativities. We find in the 7-limb prayer, accumulations, purification, and increase. So we need to increase our merit, we need to purify negativity, and we need to accumulate merit. If we want to increase merit, we need to have it have been accumulated. So we have all of those things that are so necessary that Manjushri told Lama Tsongkhapa he needed. So we have the first 2. And then the third thing that Lama Tsongkhapa was told he needed to do was have more wisdom arisen from learning or hearing, whichever you want to translate it as, analysis and meditation on what? On the works of the Nalanda Pandits. And we know that he had that breakthrough moment after his dream of Buddha Palita touching his head, and then he read one verse and had the breakthrough about emptiness, and then wrote that incredible text in praise of dependent origination. Buddha Shakyamuni's paying homage to Buddha Shakyamuni for teaching dependent origination, that text that's so moving. It's so incredible that we have access to this. So, you needn't make your practices be these fancy secret things, all the time that are just not comprehensible. Of course, we need to meditate on emptiness and bodhicitta. This should be at the core of everything that we do. It should be just the core practice too when we take refuge. We know that our refuge prayer is called the refuge and bodhicitta prayer. Sometimes we say that we say this is Lama Atisha's refuge prayer, and it says, I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by practicing giving and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. So when we look at that refuge prayer itself, we already see we're going for refuge to become a Buddha. We already see bodhicitta being presented in there. And we know that we're empty of inherent existence. The going for refuge is empty of inherent existence. And the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha are all empty of inherent existence. Empty of objective existence, empty of intrinsic existence. So we keep all of this in mind throughout all of our practices. And then when we get to that 6th preparation, in the 6 preparations where we make supplications. So first, again, just going through them real quickly, cleaning the room and setting up the altar. 1, arranging images of enlightenment. 2, putting offerings out that have been arranged beautifully and obtained honestly. 3, getting into a 7-point Vairocana posture and clearing our minds in some way, making sure our mind is clear. And then it'll say sometimes here, generating refuge and bodhicitta. There's different places where you'll see it, but generating refuge and bodhicitta. Imagining the merit field, number 4, imagining all the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas in the merit field. And then you can also be imagining the bodhicitta field where you have all sentient beings here with you. Now you make a 7-limb prayer. Number 5, you and all sentient beings are making this 7-limb prayer. And number 6 is further supplications. So you're making these further supplications to the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas that are related to specifically the practices that you're struggling with at that moment, specifically what you're working on, specifically what you're going to do next. So in your meditation, when we look at this package of 6, what are you about to do next? Are you going to do a glancing meditation and then meditate specifically on leisure and opportunity because you haven't realized it enough? If that's the case, your supplication should go like this. I supplicate all the gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas to help me thoroughly, without missing out anything, go through this glancing meditation on the stages of the path. And I supplicate the gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas to make me able to thoroughly analyze this life of leisure and opportunity so that I can realize it. So that when I get up from this cushion, I will day and night know that I should take the essence of this basis that I have. And then you go from there and do your practice. So it's important for folks to know that if you have this basis of the 6 preparations, you can do everything from there. So then, we went through all the topics of the small scope that serve as the basis for the medium scope that have to be there in order for the medium scope to work. And then what do we do once we get to the medium scope? So we previously worked on the teachings for beings of small capacity, and the medium scope starts out by saying, okay, so now meditate on the teachings shared in common with beings of small capacity. So the medium scope says this is part of the small scope. If we took scope names out, we could just call it medium scope. The beginning of the medium scope is the small scope in some ways, but we say shared in common with because we do separate them in terms of their goals. Small scope goal is good next life. Medium scope goal is an abiding nirvana, freedom from samsara altogether. Great scope goal is Buddhahood. So we separate them in terms of goals, but the earlier scopes all serve as foundations and indispensable realizations for the higher scope. So we say shared in common with. And the medium scope and small scope are no different. We need to realize this small scope in order to realize the medium scope. So let's go to Lama Tsongkhapa's text. So it's important, I think, that we go through this part a little bit. Why are the noble truths in the order that they're in? Rinpoche went over this a lot. And he would say, why is the number of truths definite? Is the order definite? You find this a lot in philosophical texts. Is this the definite order? Is this the definite number? Why wasn't the origin of suffering put first? If cause and then result. So Lama Tsongkhapa goes on to explain what the reasoning is behind this. And shows the significance of asserting that the truth of suffering is the first noble truth. So why would the Buddha not put the cause first, right? It's a common question that's asked. So Rinpoche would always clarify this point. So I want to read through this section a little bit, and then, we'll go from there. Okay, so there's a qualm. So Lama Tsongkhapa likes to write qualm and then an answer to the qualm. Like there's an opponent with a stance, and then Lama Tsongkhapa then shows how that stance isn't tenable. It isn't a good stance, and why it's not a good stance to have. So the qualm here, the opponent says, the true origins are the causes and true sufferings are their effects. Why then did the Bhagavan reverse that order? If the origin precedes sufferings and say, monks, this is the noble truth of suffering, this is the noble truth of origin. So why would Buddha do that? It doesn't really make any sense. Why would Buddha not say, hey, monks, this is what the cause and this is the effect? It doesn't seem like it goes in the order of how the things occur. Why did Buddha do that? So then Lama Tsongkhapa replies, in this case, the teacher reversed the sequence of cause and effect, not out of error, but because this reversal is vital for practice. Why? If his disciple failed to develop a proper determination to liberate themselves from cyclic existence, first, they would sever the very root of liberation. How then could he lead them to liberation? Thus, in the beginning, the darkness of ignorance enshrouded his students. They mistook the wonders of cyclic existence, which are in fact suffering, for happiness. So Buddha had to first identify exactly what suffering is in order to convince anyone that there was a liberation they would need. If you didn't think that there was a problem, you wouldn't look for a cause. You wouldn't look to try and get rid of it if it's not a problem. You would just keep it going. So the Buddha recognized that first, I have to identify exactly what the problem is for everyone. And then they'll go, oh my, I didn't realize it was quite like that. I knew I had some ups and downs, but I didn't realize that my ups were so downy when we look at it in terms of the suffering of change. So the Buddha first even though in sequentially, the first and second noble truth would seem like it should be first truth of origin, then truth of suffering. And when we look at them in terms of cause and effect, if we look at that, and we look at the cause and effect relationships that Rinpoche would teach us a lot, the cause and effect relationship that shows us how we're bound to cyclic existence. He would say we're bound to cyclic existence because of the origin of suffering causes suffering, and we're unbound from cyclic existence by engaging in a path which unbinds us from the suffering and causes a cessation, or allows for a separative effect of cessation to occur. It's not an actual effect cessation. It's just a lack of, it's a not. So we can't say it's a result technically. But when we look at it in terms of cause and effect, sure, we would say that origin causes suffering and path causes, or path makes cessation occur, makes cessation a state of being that's possible. But when we're looking at them in terms of practice, how one would need to mature one's mind to actually want to put in the kind of effort that's necessary to get rid of suffering, you have to be thoroughly disgusted with suffering. You have to be repulsed by it. You have to have this, oh my, as much as the thing that you don't want most in your life, you have to come to terms with all of contaminated happiness as being like that, as being really a situation that needs to be fixed. And if you don't have that understanding, if you only think, oh, well, there's only suffering of suffering. So sometimes I have a headache, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I feel great. I just have good and bad days. But when you realize that the suffering of change means that within every single form of happiness and cyclic existence that you experience, there's a self-destruct mechanism. There's a separation that's going to occur. There's some sort of change that's going to take place that's going to make you interact with the object of happiness in a different way in the future, whether it's because it's no longer there and you wish it was there, or it's still there and you wish it wasn't there. That thing that made you so happy, you wish it would just get out of here. And that thing that made you so happy, when it gets out of here and it was still making you happy, it's a cause for an immense amount of suffering that never would have occurred if you hadn't met with that contaminated happiness in the first place. So if the happiness isn't contaminated, then you get to have the kind of situation that a Buddha has, where the Buddha goes from bliss to bliss to bliss to bliss to bliss, and there's no self-destruct mechanism within that bliss, because it isn't contaminated, because there is no suffering of change, there is no suffering of suffering, and there is no pervasive compounded suffering, meaning even if the Buddha is feeling good today, tomorrow, and the next day, the day after that, he or she will never, ever have any kinds of suffering or ups and downs, again, because there won't be a forcing into a situation other than bliss, because the Buddha's mind forces him or her moment to moment from bliss to bliss to bliss, compassion to compassion to compassion, caring for others from caring for others to caring for others. And it's all happening spontaneously because the Buddha isn't tight, isn't held back by any kind of obstructions. The Buddha's removed all of the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience. And by removing those obstructions to omniscience, by removing not only the coarse self-cherishing attitude that even an Hinayana Arhat removes, he or she has removed the subtle self-cherishing attitude, those stains of the afflictive obstructions, the stains of the coarse self-cherishing attitude that are still left over from having such a kind of small perspective until the time when those stains are removed. And the Buddha's mind moves freely to all phenomena because the Buddha's mind isn't held back any longer by the tightness of the obstructions to omniscience. There isn't any barrier to knowing. The Buddha has a state of all knowing, and the Buddha's mind can move freely to all objects of observation. And because the Buddha has ultimate love and compassion for sentient beings, the Buddha's mind moves towards those beings. And when the Buddha sees something that he or she can do to help, the Buddha's bodies just start emanating to them. So we will end up in that state if we create the causes for that state. So this is what we will need to do. We'll have to go from moment right now, our moment to moment goes from, a self-grasping ignorance that's, driving our moment to moment to moment. And we know when the driver of our train is a terrorist, we're not probably going where we want to go. But if the driver of our train is an actual loving, caring, correct kind of driver, then we don't have to worry so much. So anyway, let me go back to where we were talking about. So why are they in this order? They're in this order so you get a disgust with cyclic existence, and then you say, why? Why is this occurring? Why do I have 8 sufferings? Why do I have 6 sufferings? Why do I have 3 sufferings? And then the Buddha says, let me tell you. This is the superior truth of origin. So I think you get it. I think you get why in terms of practice and meditation, in terms of really forcing us into this idea that we need to find out why we have this first noble truth, why it's so much more impactful if the Buddha first teaches us what suffering is, and then teaches us what suffering is again and again and again. And we get this awful taste in our mouth about it. Like the Venerable Rubina Corton says, we taste our own vomit and we don't want to taste it anymore. And we find out how we can stop that. How do we stop that? And that's exactly what the Buddha knew. We knew we had to really impact us. The Buddha knew he had to shock us because we're so used to and so conditioned to thinking the way everything is, it's just the way it is. Everything is just the way it is. And everything is just the way it is, yes, but for a reason. And when you investigate very deeply how things actually are, it becomes quite scary. When you realize this uncertainty that we have, and we're going to shuck this body off, and we're going to be separated from our friends and our loved ones. And we're not going to know where we're going, and we're going to be forced into this, and we're not going to have a choice. And that lack of freedom is misery, the Buddha said. And we start to really understand this, and we start to see and analyze, like from an empirical, we look at empirical reality and the first noble truth, we can say, yeah, the Buddha wasn't kidding. It's really, really true. Let me investigate this further. So the Buddha, the teacher reversed the sequence of cause and effect, not of error, but because this reversal is vital for practice. Why? If his disciples failed to develop a proper determination to liberate themselves from cyclic existence first, they would sever the very root of liberation. How then could he lead them to liberation? Thus, in the beginning, the darkness of ignorance enshrouded his students. They mistook the wonders of cyclic existence, which are in fact suffering, for happiness. As the 400 stanzas says, Aryadevas, fool, if there is no end whatsoever to this ocean of suffering, why are you who are caught up in it not afraid? So the point is that you have to develop this fear for cyclic existence, a desire to definitely want to get out, day and night, seeking transcendent liberation, as Lama Tsongkhapa says. We say it over and over in the 3 principal paths, the definition of renunciation. But the only way you're going to get that is to really have a disgust with cyclic existence. And the only way you disgust it is if you know why you should, exactly what it is, exactly down to the finest detail of what cyclic existence means, what it is, what it isn't. And then you can say, oh, well, this is a big mess. Is this forever? By saying, in fact, this cyclic existence is not happiness, but suffering, the Buddha explained many forms of suffering and led his disciples to become disenchanted with cyclic existence and recognizing it as suffering. As this is a necessary precondition, the Buddha first spoke about the truth of suffering. Very clear why. Once you recognize suffering, you see yourself as submerged in the ocean of suffering and realize that if you wanted to be liberated from suffering, you must counteract it. So once you realize the 8, 6, and 3 sufferings and know what they are exactly, you say, okay, this is reality. Does this have to be? Does this have to be forever or not? Is there a counteracting force? Is there some way to stop it? And then it says, moreover, you recognize that you cannot stop suffering unless you counteract its cause. By investigating the cause of suffering, you come to understand its true origin. Consequently, the Buddha spoke next about the truth of origin. So the Buddha said, okay, these are all these terrible things. Why are all these terrible things occurring? Well, I'm going to tell you why. The truth of origin, because you have a self-grasping ignorance that gives rise to inappropriate attention to things, that gives rise to afflictions, attachment, hatred, ignorance, pride, afflicted doubts, all of these negativities. And then contaminated karmas. Your body, speech, and mind is going to be a mess in terms of intention and actions of your body and your speech. And then because all results are dependent upon your causes, all these negative things you do will just cause more negativity. And the ignorance that you're always abiding in will always propel you into more samsara. And if you get rid of that first thing, get rid of that self-grasping ignorance, all of the house of cards falls, because it's all resting on top of that self-grasping ignorance. You pull that out, all of samsara falls down. And once that's not there, there's no more building up of samsara, because samsara is built on self-grasping ignorance. And when there's nothing for it to be built on, samsara's deck of cards falls and suffering is no more. And once that thing is no more, it can never happen again. And that's why we say that nirvana has no end, because there's no counteracting force. There's nothing to stop nirvana. There's nothing, because there's no longer the things that create the non-nirvana of a being. There's only things to create the nirvana, because that thing that created the non-nirvana, the samsaric existence, has been pulled out, that thing that makes the cause happen. And if you take away the seed from the corn can't grow. The seed's there, you'll get corn as long as you have causes and conditions. It's a good seed and the light, I get it. Then the corn grows. But if there's not a seed at all for the corn, and it's not created in a lab, I get it. You get what I'm saying. There's not a seed for that corn, then the corn can't be created. And if there's never, ever a seed for corn, corn will never be created again. Not that kind of corn that came from that seed. Can never, ever happen again. Likewise, if we get rid of the self-grasping ignorance, we pull that card out that's holding the entire house of cards up, then the house of cards falls, samsara falls forever. Because the self-grasping ignorance, the thing that grasps that I and phenomena, self of person and phenomena as being inherently existent, truly existent, objectively existent, that thing, that misconception, that confusion about reality is what gives rise to the contaminated reality that we experience. And once that give riser to the contamination is gone, the contamination is gone. And when there's nothing for contamination to occur left to make it occur, it never occurs. And our mind is in the nature of clear light and unsullied. And as long as it dependently originates into bliss, because the things that cause bliss to bliss to bliss are only there, and the things that cause compassion to compassion to compassion and love to love to love are only there. The Buddha's experience dependently originates into the perfection of wisdom, perfection of patience, the perfection of love, perfection of compassion, perfection of skillful means, perfection of power, perfect emanation bodies, perfect enjoyment bodies, perfect consciousness. But one aspect of the Buddha is the emptiness of the Buddha's mind that is the same aspect of our mind right now. We have the seed of perfection right now. That's the emptiness of our mind, which is the same seed of perfection that the Buddha's mind has. We have this mind that's in the nature of clear light and unsullied. It doesn't have to produce this experience that we're experiencing right now. Samsara and nirvana are all just from our minds. And samsara is from our contaminated, defiled mind. But it's not a new mind that we get. It's just a mind that the container, if you will, isn't containing the crud. It's only containing the good. And that's how we turn our minds from the mind that we have right now into a Buddha's mind. So it says, next you develop an understanding of the truth of the origin, an understanding that contaminated karma produces the suffering of cyclic existence. that afflictions produce karma and that the conception of self is the root of the affliction. Sound familiar? When you see that you can eliminate the conception of self, you will vow to realize its cessation, which is also the cessation of suffering. Thus, the Buddha spoke next about cessation. So then you say, oh boy, all these sufferings are horrible. This is just terrible. This state that I didn't even know I was in such a bad state. What's causing this all to occur? This is what's causing it all to occur. This is what's causing it. Oh, so it could end if this thing causing it wasn't there. This is the superior truth of suffering. Well, then how do I make it end? The superior truth of path. So it says then, if the teaching, the truth of suffering promotes the desire for liberation, should not the Buddha have taught the truth of cessation immediately after teaching the truth of suffering? And then the reply is, there is no mistake. Why? At this point, after you recognize the truth of suffering, you have a desire for liberation and think, if only I could attain a cessation that relieves this suffering. But if you've not identified the cause of suffering and have not seen that you can eliminate the cause, you do not yet regard liberation as something attainable, and thus do not think, I will realize cessation. So it doesn't even seem like it's in the wheelhouse of possibility. It just seems like things are just what they are. It is what it is. I can't do anything about it. If you don't see that there's an origin to your suffering, it's just like saying, you know, I would like $1 billion to appear in my hand right now and wait. It's not happening. It's not happening. If there was a way, though, that could happen and occur, then I would believe like, oh, okay, I did a whole bunch of these different things, and then I would wait for it and it would occur. It would actually come into my hand. If I knew that it was possible, it wouldn't be some silly thing that I was saying. It wouldn't be some silly goal of, you know, I'd like to have this or that, which isn't obtainable. We know it's obtainable because we know that suffering is caused by something. And we know that all causes are dependent upon, all effects are dependent upon their causes. And if there isn't a cause there, then there isn't a result. So there is a cessation. In this way, when you do think, I shall realize a cessation that is liberation, you become interested in the truth of path, wondering about the path that leads to this cessation. For this reason, the Buddha spoke about the path last. So in terms of meditation, we're coming to the conclusion that, okay, this suffering stinks. It's caused though, so it could end. All right, how do I end it? Tell me right now. What do I have to do to end this suffering? So this is why the Buddha put it in this order in terms of practice. And there's a lot of people who debate and go back and forth about why it is this and why it isn't that. Is it in terms of cause and effect, or was the Buddha teaching it in terms of practice? Well, there are two ways to look at the Four Noble Truths, in terms of cause and effect, or in terms of how to practice them. And the Buddha really presented them in Varanasi, in Sarnath at Varanasi, in terms of how we would practice them, how we would integrate them in our life. This is the superior truth of suffering. This is the superior truth of origin. This is the superior truth of cessation. This is the superior truth of path. Suffering is to be identified. Origin is to be abandoned. Cessation is to be achieved. Path is to be meditated upon. There is no suffering to identify. There is no origin to abandon. There is no cessation to achieve, and there is no path to rely upon. So the Buddha made these four statements, but they were always in this order of suffering, origin, cessation, and path. And we can talk about the meaning of those three different kinds of points that the Buddha was making. And when we look at that third way the Buddha talked about, that there is no suffering, there is no origin, there is no, that can be interpreted in two different ways, depending on if you're looking at it from the point of view of the target audience of the First Noble Truth teaching in Sarnath, which were the Vaibhashika and Sautrantika school practitioners, or if you're looking at it in terms of the highest Madhyamika Prasangika view, how you interpret that third set of statements that the Buddha stated about the Four Noble Truths differs from school to school. So we won't get into the detail of that, but know that it's a big, big world of Buddhist tenet systems and philosophy and understandings. And if you keep yourself in a very, very small lane and just kind of where you kind of feel your comfort level is at, and don't broaden your horizons, you might be missing out on something that's going to be necessary for you to have a complete view, for you to have a complete ripening path. And we know that we have to combine ripening paths and liberating paths in order for us to become Buddhas. We have to have the ripening paths of purification and accumulation and renunciation and bodhicitta, and then combine it with the liberating paths of the wisdom realizing emptiness in order for us to be successful. So Buddha spoke about the path last, and then we find from Maitreya the sublime continuum. Recognize, and this is Rinpoche said this so many times, and then we'll end here. Recognize that you are ill. Eliminate the cause of the illness. Attain health. Rely on a remedy. Likewise, you should recognize, eliminate, attain, and rely upon suffering, its cause, its cessation, and the path, respectively. So clearly recognize that you are ill. When we look at the 6 qualities that a student should have, we say that, the 3 qualities of the 3 pots. And then there's 6 qualities that a student should have whenever listening to a teaching. And the first is recognize that you're ill. You're ill. You have these contaminations. You have the ignorance. You're sick with afflictions. Your mind is afflicted. You're mentally ill. Your mind has attachment. Your mind has a hatred. Your mind has ignorance. Understand that you're ill. You have this illness. And then it says, eliminate the cause of the illness. So first, recognizing that you're ill is the first noble truth, saying you have 8 sufferings, you have 6 sufferings, you have 3 sufferings. And then it says, eliminate the cause of the illness. This is referring to the superior truth of origin, understanding that your suffering comes from self-grasping ignorance. The cause of your suffering is self-grasping ignorance. When we look at the way that a student looks at the teaching, you look at the URL, the teacher is like a doctor, and the Dharma is like medicine. So medicine to do what? To use against the cause of your illness. And then the taking the medicine is actually like your participation in getting rid of the cause of the illness. You are actually engaging in the practice of the Dharma. So we look at that you are ill, the teacher is a doctor, the Dharma is like medicine. You practicing the Dharma is like taking the medicine, and you're recognizing that the gurus are so incredible. The Buddha is so incredible, and may these teachings stay in this world. Because you recognize that you're ill, you recognize that there is a cause for the illness. You recognize this is a superior truth of suffering, and then you recognize that this is a superior truth of origin. The superior truth of suffering is the recognition that you're ill. The superior truth of origin is looking at the cause of the illness that you need to abandon. So Buddha said you have to first identify the suffering, recognize that you're ill. And then the Buddha said, origin is to be abandoned, eliminate the cause of the illness, in this quote from Maitreya, and then attain health. The Buddha stated that cessation is to be achieved, attain health, achieve health. And then the Buddha said, rely on a remedy. What's the remedy? How do you achieve health? How do you achieve cessation? The third noble truth. You achieve the third noble truth of cessation of suffering by relying on a path, by relying upon taking the actual medicine that the doctor gave because you're ill. And by taking that medicine, you could get well. So likewise, you should recognize, eliminate, attain, and rely upon suffering, its cause, its cessation, and path, respectively. And then I'll just read the last paragraph. This being the case, the 4 truths are taught repeatedly throughout the Mahayana and Hinayana. So it's not just that the Buddha taught the 4 noble truths once. Buddha taught the 4 noble truths all over the place, but we call it historically the first turning of the wheel of Dharma in Varanasi is where he taught the 4 noble truths first. But the Buddha taught 4 noble truths in varying different aspects, and you can even interpret the 4 noble truths in terms of highest yoga tantra as well. Since the Sugata has included in the Four Noble Truths the vital points concerning the process of cyclic existence and its cessation, this teaching is crucial for achieving freedom. Since this synoptic outline of practice is important, it must be taught to students in just this order. Why? Unless you reflect on the truth of suffering to the point of actually becoming revolted by cyclic existence, your desire to attain liberation will be mere words. And whatever you do will lead to origins of further suffering. Unless you reflect on the origin of suffering until you have a good understanding of the root of cyclic existence, which is karma and the afflictions, you will be like an archer who does not see the target. You will miss the essential points of the path. You will mistake what is not a path to freedom from cyclic existence for the path and exhaust yourself without result. Finally, if you fail to understand the need to eliminate suffering and its origin, you will also fail to recognize that liberation that provides relief from suffering and its origin. Hence, your interest in liberation will be a mere conceit. So you can waste a lot of time, Lama Tsongkhapa is saying, with practices that seem like they're good, that feel like they're good, that seem like they're really doing something for you in this life. But if you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. If you're attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. And if you're attached to samsara, you don't have renunciation. There's no possible way to achieve nirvana because you don't have the ripening path to make that happen. Very, very interesting. And if you're attached to this life and you're seeing the wonders of this life is, oh, this is the best, this is all that matters, it's all got to be just like this, you're ingraining in your mind an opposition to the small scope. Believe it or not, because the small scope helps you release your attachment to this life. And that's how you become a spiritual practitioner, is by realizing the small scope. You don't become a spiritual practitioner, according to the great masters, until you abandon your attachment to this life. That's where Lama Atisha says spiritual practice starts. He says it doesn't even start until you abandon this life. And that the path doesn't even start until we're talking about the medium scope, actual path. Thank you so much for listening. If you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. If you're attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you're attached to your own self-interest, there's no bodhicitta. If there is grasping, you do not have the view. Okay, and one moment here. Okay, so we'll just do the concluding prayers. Including mandala offering and dedication prayer. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Now we'll read a prayer for the flourishing of Ajit Tsongkhapa's teachings by Guntan Dembi Drome. Though he's the father, producer of all conquerors, as a conqueror's son, he produced the thought of upholding as a conqueror's son, he produced the thought of upholding the conqueror's Dharma in infinite worlds. Through this truth, may the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. When in the presence of Buddha Indraketu, he made his vow, the conqueror and his offspring praised his powerful courage. Through this truth, may the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. That the lineage of pure view and conduct might spread, he offered a white crystal rosary to the sage who gave him a conch and prophesied, through this truth, may the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. His pure view free of eternity or destruction, his pure meditation cleansed of dark fading and fog, his pure conduct practiced according to conqueror's orders, may the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. Learned, since he extensively sought out learning, reverend, rightly applying it to himself, good, dedicating all for beings and doctrine, may the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. Through being sure that all scriptures definitive and interpretive were without contradiction, advice for one person's practice, he stopped all misconduct. May the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. Listening to explanations of the three Pitakas, realizing teachings, practice of the three trainings, his skilled and accomplished life story is amazing. May the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. Outwardly calmed and subdued by the hearer's conduct, inwardly trusting in the two stages, he allied without clash in the good paths of Sutra and Tantra. May the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. Combining voidness explained as the causal vehicle with great bliss achieved by method, the effect vehicle. Heart essence of 80,000 Dharma bundles. May the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. By the power of the ocean, oath-bound, by the ocean of oath-bound doctrine protectors, like the main guardians of the three beings past the quick acting Lord Vaishravana Karmayana. May the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. In short, by the lasting of glorious gurus' lives, by the earth being full of good, learned, reverend holders of the teaching, and by the increase of power of its patrons, may the conqueror Lozong's teachings flourish. 8 verses for training the mind. With the determination to accomplish the highest welfare of all sentient beings who surpass even a wish-granting jewel, I will learn to hold them supremely dear. Whenever I associate with others, I will learn to think of myself as the lowest amongst all and respectfully hold others to be supreme from the very depths of my heart. In all actions, I will learn to search into my mind, and as soon as a disturbing emotion arises, endangering myself and others, I will firmly face and avert it. I will learn to cherish ill-natured beings and those oppressed by strong misdeeds and sufferings as if I had found a precious treasure difficult to find. When others out of jealousy treat me badly with abuse, slander, and so on, I will learn to take all loss and offer victory to them. When the one whom I benefited with great hope unreasonably hurts me very badly, I will learn to view that person as an excellent spiritual guide. In short, I will learn to offer to everyone without exception all help and happiness directly and indirectly, and respectfully take upon myself all the harm and suffering of my mothers. I will learn to keep all these practices undefiled by the stains of the 8 worldly concerns, and by understanding all phenomena as like a illusion, be released from the bondage of attachment. Any mistakes that I've made, may they be purified by Vajrasattva's mantra. May your mind be purified by Vajrasattva's mantra, imagining Vajrasattva, who's inseparable from Khyentse Geshe Wandak, inseparable from the teacher, is emitting light rays and nectars. White light rays and nectars are coming down and showering down onto us and dissolving into us, transforming into white ohms and purifying our body. Red light rays and nectars are showering down on us and transforming into red ahs and purifying our speech. And blue light rays and nectars are showering down on us, turning into blue hums and purifying our mind. So again, white light rays and nectars, om, red light rays and nectars, ah, blue light rays and nectars, hum, purifying our body, speech, and mind, are showering down on us as I recite this mantra. Om benzazato zamayam anubalaya benzazato senabajista dita me babazuto gaya me babazu bogaya me anuragda me babazavazidi me braja savagamazucha me kitam chiankuru hom ha 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 ho bhagavan savadata gata benzamame moka benza baba mahasamaya sapa ahom fe. May we always be protected by Paul Lamo, who Rinpoche said is our protector deity. Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Tunja Galara Jamo Rama Chudatu Tunja Rula Rula Hung Jo Hong Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Tunja Galara Jamo Rama Chudatu Tunja Rula Rula Hung Jo Hong Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Tunja Galara Jamo Rama Chudatu Tunja Rula Rula Hung Jo Hong Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Tunja Galara Jamo Rama Chudatu Tunja Rula Rula Hung Jo Hong Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Tunja Galara Jamo Rama Chudatu Tunja Rula Rula Hung Jo Hong Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Tunja Galara Jamo Rama Chudatu Tunja Rula Rula Hung Jo Hong Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Tunja Galara Jamo Rama Chudatu Tunja Rula Rula Hung Jo Hong Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Tunja Galara I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri, and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. Long life prayer for His Holiness the Dalai Lama. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness. All powerful Avalokiteshvara Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. And we'll end with Rinpoche's prayer. A complex yogi poses as a simple monk. Homage to Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, our precious spiritual friend who is inseparable from Aryatara. I fully prostrate, covering as many atoms of the earth as possible, to your pure body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities. I offer to you drinking water, bathing water, flowers, incense, candles, scented water, food, and music purified by Om Ah Om. The rarity of having 1 million wish-fulfilling gems is a common occurrence compared to meeting with a holy teacher like you, who placed the complete path to Buddhahood in our childlike hands. Just like Atisha, who came to Tibet with a lamp to dispel the darkness of ignorance, You, kind abbot, arrived in the West with a lineage purer than a diamond and begged us never to be satisfied with partial instructions. The teachings of the extensive deeds and profound view lineages flowed from your lips like nectar for our ears that elucidated the teachings for beings of three capacities. Now that sound has stopped. All composite things are impermanent. You told us that all of your teachers passed away and understood this sadness, entreating us to continue our studies. The Buddha does not wash away the negativities of beings, nor does he remove their miseries by his hands. His spiritual realizations are not transferred to them. It is by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. We are not prepared to take this difficult journey to the highest goodness of Buddhahood without your continued guidance. The sadness in our hearts would be too overwhelming. May you swiftly return to this world and take care of us in all of our lives, wherever we may be, never leaving our hearts and crowns. May all sentient beings perfectly realize renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness, so they know who you really are. Thank you so much, everybody. I hope you become more like Khenser Geshe Wandak this week. I hope that your mind becomes more and more saturated every single day with renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness. And we have to start with the teaching shared in common with beings of small capacity, because that's the pre-step of actual renunciation, where we renounce the lower realms of cyclic existence, and then we can really get our minds to be big enough to renounce all of cyclic existence. And then we make our minds even bigger and renounce the all of cyclic existence. And we want everyone to be free from cyclic existence altogether. And we want to become a Buddhist, that we can become the most reliable guides in the universe, so that we can help everyone achieve the aim that we want to achieve so much. And the reason that we want to achieve it is because we understand the mess that we're in and how to get out of it. So thank you so much. And thank you to all the holy gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas for teaching us and for being such a pure lineage and holding on to these instructions so well. And I'm going to try so hard to make sure that these instructions don't move in one way or another away from that main purpose, so that we can hold this lineage so pure, like the diamond lineage that it is. Thank you. We'll see you soon.